Alrighty, we're connecting. Hey, we made it.
This was my greatest fear. I swear to God, we should have done a trial run.
Technology at its best.
I had never really used Instagram before, and it shows.
Well, we made it, so that is the,
I'm try
that
to
is the plus.
angle this better. Hang on. Trying to figure out a way that I don't have to hold this. This is why I do it on my phone. Okay, I'm holding it. I'm okay.
There you go. Well, welcome everyone to Tint episode 3. My name is Joey. I am the founder and CEO of Greek Law Incorporated. For those of you who are new, Greek Law is a nonprofit organization. We go to different universities and high schools, and we teach students about sexual assault and consent. This is year number 4, and because we are locked down in the house and we can't go to our normal schools like we normally do, for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, decided to do this little show series called Teal, Tint, where I get to talk to some of my favorite people about sexual assault prevention. And tonight, my guest is probably she's super high on the favorite person list. When they gave us the opportunity to pick what professor could hood us at graduation, I'm like, y'all even have to ask. Y'all know it. You know who it is. But Professor Sweeny from the University of Louisville School of Law is joining us tonight. How's it going? Right?
Yeah, I'm not flourishing in this environment, I have to admit. Being stuck at home with a very, very active 6-year-old is not really conducive to any kind of consistent work effort, particularly when you're trying to write something that requires you to really think hard and for long periods of time without distraction.
Absolutely.
Not available.
As you can see, I am here in my daughter's playroom with the Mario in the back.
So cute.
I don't know how many Zoom meetings that you've had to do so far, but on every Zoom meeting, this kid has never met a camera she doesn't like. So she's usually dancing in the back and doing everything. And, you know, everyone thinks it's cute as I die a little bit inside.
Yeah, and they smile and laugh, and then it just encourages them. No, I've got it. Yeah.
So, well.
What's behind your head? There's another picture.
Princess
Peach.
Princess Peach. So, Revelry Art Gallery, they're not paying me. This is not a paid ad, but Revelry Art Gallery is where all this cool art comes from. So,
real cute.
Yeah, show them some love whenever you can.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're going to talk about the Me Too movement. Kind of taking a look back, kind of in a retrospective look back at Me Too, kind of looking to see everything that's happened, some of the ups, some of the downs, and kind of where we can go from here. I'm going to put my little question sheet up here. So the Me Too movement, while it's been going on since about 2006, it really seemed to get hot in 2017. I was a 2L at the time, and Greek Law was about a year old. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my gosh, the revolution is here. Like, it's finally here. Right. Seeing all these women finally being able to step up and have a voice and kind of speak out. So let's go back to 2017 mentally.
Sure.
Me Too's popping up everywhere. What are you thinking? Kind of how are you viewing it at the time?
So the whole thing started because of Harvey Weinstein, at least the resurgence in 2017. So I remember reading, was it the New York Times articles, the Ronan Farrow articles, and, I was not on Twitter at all at the time. So I didn't get to see it live, kind of unfolding with all the, to see the hashtag kind of explode. But I certainly read a lot about it. And so, it was kind of exciting. And then to see the fallout start happening, that not only were women speaking about these things that had happened to them, and some of them now start naming names, right? Because the whole thing about the Me Too hashtag is that's all it kind of says is like, just write Me Too, right? And that it didn't, some people, that's all they do, right? And that's totally cool. And you're just adding your voice. You're like, yep, pretty common. And so what was cool, though, is that people started actually telling their stories and being met with, instead of skepticism or hostility, we're being met with love and acceptance by other women. And that's what made, I think, the movement grow, is not just, the simple, Me Too without any kind of stories attached probably would have done something, but the power of the storytelling model and how we as humans react so well to a story, I think really helped. And then the next phase, right, so the next level, besides Me Too, besides telling stories, is people started naming names. And that's where things, I think, really started hitting the fan for some of these guys, right? So, and because the next step after these, big, powerful people, and there's certain industries that were hit harder than most. So like the entertainment industry, politics, and then there's some other industries that have, to a lesser extent, like I saw some things about, the literary world in certain areas. There's some different tech companies, right? So we had different tech companies where it hit. So there was a few industries that were really hit hard. And it was exciting to see it. It was exciting to see that these women are accusing these men, and some of these things happen, years, decades ago, but there are actual repercussions.
Right.
And so, at the beginning, and, for the most part, not legal repercussions, but, social repercussions, employment repercussions. People are getting fired. Yeah. Big, powerful people getting fired or losing projects or something. And I think that's just what made the movement go even stronger, is that people started saying, oh, they're listening to us finally, and not just women listening to other women, but people actually have the ability to do something about it. We're listening. So it moved so fast. I actually, I'm currently working on an article about the Me Too movement, and I'm comparing different Me Too movements in different countries. Mm-hmm. Just like I presented it, I got some slides. I've got some lovely PowerPoint slides. And a couple of the slides are just all the pictures of all these men that were brought down. And I'm like, and this was October, wow. Right? And now here's November. Like it felt almost daily. So that part was really exciting. Do I want to stop at the good part, or do you want me to keep going and when we get to the bad part?
We'll get to the bad part. We'll get there.
Okay, we'll stick with the good part for now. So that part was really exciting, and it felt like things were, you could see tangible things happening, and not just, there was this groundswell, but there was also, consequences, which was really, really cool to see.
Yeah. So once again, in 2017, that's where I became aware of it. Obviously,
yeah.
Rose McGowan, Alyssa Milano. But, mm-hmm. Actually it goes back to 2006, Tarana Burke, mm-hmm. which is a name that I had to look up to find that name. But Tarana Burke is the one that got this whole thing started. Do you mm-hmm. think that she receives anywhere near the amount of credit that she should get for this? And do you think that the Me Too movement, as it has gone now, do you think that is kind of what she wanted? Did it stay in her view that she wanted when she started this?
So, first of all, 2006, she started it on MySpace. And that's what I feel like I need to say to really put it in perspective. She started on MySpace. For you young kids, you probably don't. Hi, Georgia. You probably don't remember MySpace. I still have a profile on MySpace, and I can't remember the password I used, so I can't delete it because I don't remember my password. So it's just going to be there forever.
That's dangerous. There's probably some really young, embarrassing pictures there.
I mean, young, yes. Embarrassing. I'm not that interesting, Joey. Like, I don't have interesting photos, I'm so sorry to say. So anyway, so Tarana Burke, I don't know, because it's hard for me to say if she's gotten enough recognition, because in my world, the scholarly world that studies this, every article talks about her. Mm-hmm. We're very careful to do that, because And even Alyssa Milano said, "Oh, by the way, I didn't start this. Tarana Burke started this." So Alyssa Milano has I think done a nice job with, you know, giving credit back to Tarana Burke. And it's very important to mention also, for something we might talk about in a little bit, is that Tarana Burke is a Black woman, and these two white ladies are the ones that made it explode. Which is, you know, I'm glad it exploded, but we can't forget where it came from, which was a Black woman who counseled these young girls who are, you know, living through, you know, as the consequence of some horrific harassment, abuse, assault, everything. So she saw, you know, the worst of it. And she, I think she has gotten some credit. There was, you know, a Time magazine article about her. She was invited. I saw her on the red carpet when they did, which was it, the Emmys? Which one they did Time's Up? Was it the Emmys?
That sounds
Golden
right.
Globes?
Yeah.
Or the Golden Globes? I think it's Golden Globes. Anyway, she was there. Yeah, it was one of those. She was there. She was there wearing black, and she was taking, you know, and had a big photo with all these celebrities. So I think that her, and I don't know, for most people who think of Me Too, I don't even know if they know it started, you know, the second wave anyway, by Alyssa Milano. I don't know if people associate any name with Me Too. So obviously I want Tarana Burke to get all the credit.
Right.
Because she did start it. Alyssa Milano should get some credit because she did make it explode, because she had the power to do that, right? Because she's, you know, an actress, and so she had a lot more followers, and so, you know, that she did work for it. And so I don't want to diminish her contribution. I don't want to diminish Rose McGowan's contribution for, like, literally going to court. So, you know, I think there's enough credit to go around.
Right.
But it is very important that people realize how amazing Tarana Burke is, and she is a full-time activist and still works on a lot of these. So, and the last question you had, has this kind of gotten away from what she originally intended? She said it did. So yes, it has. She really wanted it to really be focused on sexual assault and, you know, really egregious sexual harassment, and Me Too's kind of moving, and it's become this more organic thing, and it's being used to talk about a lot of things that were not part of her original intention. And she has said that she wants people to remember what it's the core of it, and to, you know, really focus on those issues because they're so important. Right.
Let's stay in Hollywood for a second. So I think you're frozen. There you go. So I recently was on a panel about the correlation of sexual assault and then suicide. And as you can imagine, a panel like that, we're going in different directions, but somehow we wound up going into the Me Too direction. There was only one other female that was on the panel. And the controversial statement of the night came from her, where she stated that she didn't really care too much for Me Too. And when I'm scooting over at that point, I'm like, oh, okay, you hopped on this island, here you go. But her reasoning behind it was that she feels like Me Too is being used by certain people in Hollywood to kind of bolster their careers, or it's kind of turned into a situation where people can, you know, kind of hop behind that hashtag and get attention where they may not have gotten attention. As the whole she began today started getting deeper, and I think she even mentioned at some point that, hey, these women have, these women, you know, they could choose not to go into the hotel room. They could choose not to get on the casting couch. They're choosing to do so, and then after they do that, they hop behind this hashtag and, you know, ride it all the way out. And at that point, I'm like I'm just gonna let you field all the questions on that. Thoughts on that?
Okay, who is this person? I don't need a name. I don't need a name, but what's her background? Like, who is she?
Let me think on what her background is, because...
Okay, was she like a scholar? Was she an academic? Was she like...
No, sorry. I know exactly. She had a legal background, but not a lawyer background, more like a law enforcement background.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, that's worse. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay. So there's a lot, and you cut out for a little bit for me, so but there was plenty to unpack there. So this idea that these women have choice to not go to the hotel room is not true, pretty much. Like, yeah, they have a choice, but how much of a choice do they have? This is a lot of victim blaming. A lot. So the problem is that the person who really had the choice and the power was Harvey Weinstein, and he could have not done those things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there. That the person who made the bad choice in that situation was not the woman who was like, well, I guess it's okay. I'll go to his hotel. He said he wants to talk about a party he's going to give me. People say he's nice. That's not the bad choice. That might have been a naive choice, an overly trusting choice. The bad choice was to sexually assault someone. So let's just go there. That's the probably the worst choice of the choices made that day by anyone in that situation. So that annoys me. So the idea that they took advantage, that they allowed it to happen, and then decided to use the hashtag to complain about it, ignores the trauma and vilifies women who were victimized.
Right.
And ignores the power differential that was going on in that room. And that really upsets me that a police officer, someone involved with law enforcement, was saying this stuff. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. There's been a lot of investigations, especially into LMPD, about how they handle rape cases. I don't know if you saw that. They did like a podcast about it. That woman who was basically roofied in a hotel and woke up in this strange man's bedroom, and there was blood everywhere, and she called the cops, and they basically not only, were like, well, how much you were drinking, but they also basically never charged the guy, and the cops called him to give him some advice and to console him.
Wow. Yeah,
no, it's awful. So when I hear a female police officer saying that crap, that hurts a lot.
Yeah.
Me Too is not, there's a lot we can talk about whether people are misusing it. Because guess what? Some people are misusing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. Some men are misusing it, by the way,
yeah.
As well as women. But that's the thing. When you have a tool, it can be used and it can be misused. Does that make it a bad tool? No.
Right.
So Me Too has a lot of power behind it. It does. And so people can misuse it. True. I'm not going to say that that's not the case. I'm just saying that you don't throw away the tool just because very few people are in fact misusing it.
Right.
There's a lot of, this is all part of, the bad part, the backlash to Me Too. And the idea, that Me Too can go too far, right? Has it gone too far? Like a year in, we're like, has it gone too far? I'm like, no.
Right.
In fact, no. In fact, it has not. I promise, Joey, when it goes too far, I'll let you know.
Let me know. Let me know.
I will. I promise to call you immediately and let you know. And be like, you know what? It's now. Yeah.
One of the things
hasn't happened yet.
One of the things that I remember from all the way back in 2015 from one of our first lawyering skills classes is...
Oh, God, did I have you way back in 2015?
Yep. I remember you telling our class that when you guys are done with school here, you will think different. You will have a different way of thinking than your friends and than all of your non-legal peers. Mm-hmm. It can be a gift. It can be a curse sometimes. And I think a good example of that, so something that I've been noticing, not that much now, but definitely whenever it was going on, especially, here in the Black community, was when Bill Cosby and R. Kelly both got snatched up. I've seen a lot of people say, well, what about Harvey Weinstein? Now, this is before, the Harvey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, the justice meted out against them two seemed to go a lot quicker, didn't it?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
about Harvey Weinstein? What about Donald Trump? What about Charlie Sheen? What about all of these white men who have been accused of doing equally heinous things, but seem to somehow, kind of skate around it? And I made the mistake of trying to point out, like, well, the Constitution says this about the president, and this was a civil matter versus a criminal, and eventually you just give up and realize just run with it. But it seems like there's been a cross between the totally shoddy treatment that people of color get in the justice system with
overall, by the way,
with Me Too. It just seems like it just seems like if you went to the Innocence Project's webpage, you could find a lot better examples of getting railroaded in court than Bill Cosby and R. Kelly.
Well, they're not innocent, right?
Right. Thoughts about the crossing between those areas?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of criticism about the Me Too movement, that it is a very white movement. And I think those critiques are well-founded, to be honest. It was started, even though Tarana Burke started it, like, it has been taken on, and like the high, powerful, people that were able to speak out and be heard were people with a certain amount of privilege themselves. Right. So we're talking like actresses, Hollywood actresses, like, oh, people are listening to them. Like, well, yes, they know how to use the media. Like, people actually seem to care what they say. And so it's not filtering, the criticism is that it's not filtering down to, because, the vast majority of women in the workplace get harassed, and that don't make the news. So what's going on with them? And there's definitely, an intersectionality issue. There was some stuff about Travis Smiley, who was the head of PBS, and he got fired under Me Too stuff, and he was welcomed by World Network. He works for them now, so he got hired up real quick because, and I'm just reading about this because, I'm writing an article about how the Black community kind of accepted him, and I think it's because of this perception that Me Too is a white thing. And in some ways, I think the critique is well-founded. I do, that it is, that at least what we see in the media is a bunch of white people pointing the finger at white people, and then white people come and take care of the white people.
Right.
And it's very white. There's a lot of, that is well-founded. There is some evidence that it is impacting people who aren't in the media, that there have been some, some people that aren't, A-list celebrities are getting justice. And that includes people of color. But it's a lot more diffuse, and it's harder. It's a lot harder because they don't have the status and they don't have the privilege. Right. So if you're trying to tell me that, people of color, Black men of color are more likely to get swept up by Me Too, yeah, totally. Yeah. Is that fair? Nope. Did they?
I think you're kind of frozen there. You're a little frozen. Well, while we are waiting to catch up and come back, okay, I think maybe she got kicked there, but she'll hop back on here momentarily. Technology, right? While we're waiting for Professor Sweeny to hop back on, for those of you who are watching, this is Teal, Tint, episode 3. We are talking about the Me Too movement. We're kind of looking back at it, looking at the good, the bad, the ugly, with Professor Sweeny from the University of Louisville School of Law. I'm going to send her a little message real quick to let her know to hop back on. I think she had a bad connection. Yeah, she just messaged. She said, my connection sucks. Just let me know when you get back on. I'll add you again. Oh, here we go. She's back. Go live with Joanne Sweeny. Yes. You're back.
Yes. So like now I just turned off my Wi-Fi. I'm just using my phone. Like this is anyway, where did I get cut off?
The joys of live television. No, we were just talking about just kind of how Me Too is kind of how it affects people of color differently.
Yeah. I don't know what part where you lost me, but basically what I was saying is that, you know, the problem isn't that justice moved too quickly against those two men, it's that it's probably moving too slowly for everybody else. But Harvey Weinstein has the money and the privilege and the ability to slow it down, I guess. And, you know, these things took place in different places. But, you know, it's not, it worries me when people are like, you know, and I can see why. Like, why are they attacking these black men and not this white guy? And, you know, and it just took longer. But I can see at the time they're probably thinking, like, only black guys are getting picked up with this. Right. That sucked. And it turned out, you know, mostly not to be true, but there are plenty of other white dudes that should probably be going to jail that will not go to jail. And there's a lot of problems legally and that have caused that situation, like a statute of limitations and things like that. That, you know, there's a statute of limitations for rape in most places. So, you know, the only crime where there definitely isn't a statute of limitations is for murder. And by statute of limitations, if anyone's not a law person watching, it's that after, when you commit a crime, if they don't charge you within a certain period of time after you've committed it, then the crime, like, ceases to exist. Mm. So, like, statute of limitations. So, like, if they don't figure out that it was you that did the thing, except for murder. Murder is no statute of limitations.
So let's shift gears real quick. I want to talk about men.
Gross. No, it's fine.
One of the things that I always make sure to add into my consent presentations is that just because you're a man does not mean you are exempt from being sexually assaulted. True. And we spend a little bit of time on that. I think whenever I first bring that up, I can see a lot of minds in the room kind of going to sexual assault by another man. I'm like, you know, females can sexually assault us too. One of the things when it came to Me Too that I was kind of hoping for was to hear more from male survivors to hop in there and to say Me Too, because I'm thinking like, okay, this could highlight something that we don't talk about that much on the male side of things. I don't know if I saw that as much. What about you?
So, like, the big case was Anthony Rapp, but that was same sex, right? That was Kevin Spacey. So that's that. But the only other thing I've seen, and it wasn't ever like, this isn't a person who told their story, but do you remember, I don't know if it was American Idol or something, but Katy Perry kissed that contestant?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the closest I've seen. There was also an academic, I'm trying to remember her name now, where she got taken on, you know, because of, she was harassing. It was men, yeah, I think. Her grad students, this professor.
Yeah.
She's very unapologetic about it. So I'm like, ugh. So there's a few, but yeah. Like, it's not, and I think it is the stigma, right? That men are not supposed to be able to be physically assaulted by a woman. Like, you know, guys are supposed to be stronger and tougher, and you're the aggressor, not the, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of toxic masculinity in that, that you can't be, like, you know, men have trouble admitting victimhood at all. And if it's sexual victimhood, and then you say, oh, and it's by a woman, whew, right. That is a lot to overcome. The stigma, that's like triple stigma.
One of the byproducts of Me Too that I kind of saw was the hashtag Not Me movement, which I think the credit goes to Cuba Gooding Jr.'s lawyer for kind
Correct.
Of getting that rolling. But yeah, you have a lot of guys saying, oh, well, not me. And there was a commercial from Gillette.
Yeah, I loved that commercial.
You know, the Gillette commercial, We Believe the Best Men Can Be commercial, came out early 2019. I recently been preparing for this. I watched it again, and I'm like, yes, like yes, this is the exact message that needs to be out. The response to that commercial, however, was a lot of negativity. If you look at the likes and dislikes, 811,000 likes, 1.5 million dislikes. Don't be dicks. Why do you feel like men are threatened by voices like that? And why do you think that they refuse to kind of step to the front line?
A lot of reasons. So, I mean, the short answer is patriarchy, with a dash of rape myth in there. That men, like, there's a lot of rape myths in our society that talk about that people who commit rape and by extension harassment, assault, whatever, are, you know, these aberrant monsters and not like the normal nice guy, which is like statistically untrue. So men don't like to think that they could have, like when this whole thing, Me Too thing came out, people, like men were like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do now. Could I have done something? I'm like, yes, you could, without even realizing it. Yes. And men for a very long time have not had to think very hard about how they interact with women and think about, is this coming off the right way? Women do that constantly. Can I just point that out? That anytime I'm talking to a man, there's a little like thing going on in the back of my brain that's like, am I standing too close? Was that like, did I smile? Am I leaning? What's happening? Like constantly taking the temperature, constantly. And I don't think men have that. I think men were like, I'm just having a conversation. And then you can just talk about what you want to talk about without worrying about what this means. And so when men were like, now I have to think about this all the time, I'm like, yep, enjoy. Yeah. So I think there's resistance to that, to thinking about, I could have hurt somebody and not known it, right? That the things that I was taught by my parents, who I love, about being tough and being a good dude, may have been wrong, and may have actually contributed to women being hurt, and that affects your identity, right? If you think of yourself as a decent human being, and someone goes like, oh yeah, but you did this thing, or you could have done this thing, you will resist it. Right. And I think that's where a lot of the resistance is coming from. I think a lot of it comes from, again, the patriarchy tells men that they should be a certain way. They put men in a box, a certain box. Women get put in this box, men in this box. And that's the whole point when we say toxic masculinity, which some guys are like, masculinity is not toxic. I'm like, if you're doing it right, it's not. Right. But the whole point of toxic masculinity is that it's toxic to men. That it's against you, not us. We know you're toxic. It's fine. We're worried about you, okay? So there's, you know, a bunch of literature and stuff, and you could talk to Professor Jamie Abrams about masculinity theory, and she would love to talk to you about that because it's really interesting. But it's all of this idea that men are supposed to be tough and not cry and all that stuff, and you know, not show their emotions. And it is, you know, becomes, you know, it creates, you know, generations of men who the only emotion that they are socially allowed to express is anger. Right. Right? And so every emotion they feel gets turned into anger because they're allowed to express anger. So we're going to go with anger. And that can lead to, you know, violence. Right. Right? But they don't want to think about that. And I don't blame them. That sounds like a horrible thing to think about. You know, anytime you have to think, like, look back at your own behavior and think about, oh God, did I do something wrong? Did I hurt someone without meaning to, right? So that thing I thought was a joke, did that really offend somebody, is not a nice thing to do. And so, yeah, they're resisting it, and they're resisting the, you know, the message that is contrary maybe to what they've been taught about what a man is supposed to be. They don't like the new message because it means that they were taught wrong.
So let's stay there on looking back at our own behavior for a moment. I want to talk about Aziz Ansari.
Yeah, I knew this was where I was going. I liked him.
Hilarious. And yeah, I'm a fan of his, but he has a story from 2018 that popped up right in the middle of the Me Too movement. For those of you who are watching that maybe don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to take a second to read an excerpt of the article so that you guys can kind of catch up as to where we're at. And Thieves and Sorry went on a date, and the date went back to the apartment. And I'm going to read this excerpt.
His apartment. His apartment.
I'm going to read this excerpt so you can kind of see where we're at here. He said something along the lines of, "How about you hop up and take a seat?" Within moments, he was kissing her. In a second, his hand was on my breast. Then he was undressing her. Then he undressed himself. She remembers feeling uncomfortable at how quickly things escalated. When Ansari told her he was going to grab a condom within minutes of their first kiss, Grace voiced her hesitation explicitly. I said something like, "Slow down. Whoa. Let's relax for a sec. Let's chill." She says he then resumed kissing her, briefly performed oral sex on her, and asked her to do the same thing to him. She did, but not for long. It was really quick. Everything pretty much was touched and done within 10 minutes of hooking up, except for actual sex. She says Ansari began making a move on her that he repeated during their encounter. The move he kept doing was taking his two fingers in a V shape and putting them in my mouth, in my throat to wet his fingers, because the moment he'd stick his fingers in my throat, he'd go straight for my vagina and try to finger me. Grace called the move the claw. Ansari also physically pulled her hand towards his penis multiple times throughout the night, from the time he first kissed her on the countertop onward. He probably moved my hand to his dick 5 to 7 times, she said. He really kept doing it after I moved it away. But the main thing was that he wouldn't let her move away from him. She compared the path they cut across the apartment to a football play. It was 30 minutes of me getting up and moving, and him following and sticking his fingers down my throat again. It was really repetitive. It felt like a fucking game. Throughout the course of her short time in the apartment, she says she used verbal and nonverbal cues to indicate how uncomfortable and distressed she was. Most of my discomfort was expressed in me pulling away and mumbling. I know that my hands stopped moving at some points, she said. I stopped moving my lips and turned cold. Whether Ansari didn't notice Grace or knowingly ignored her, it is impossible for her to say. I know I was physically giving off cues that I wasn't interested. I don't think that was noticed at all, or if it was ignored. So, when I originally, all the way back then, read that, where my brain goes first isn't, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person that I'm a fan of would do this. Oh my God, that sounds horrible for that, for that woman. My brain first goes to like, well, shit. Have I ever been in a position where I was getting clear signs of no, but I kept on going? Like, I'm trying to think back to now to every incident in the frat house that I may have had over 10 years ago, trying to think, well, shit, am I still good? Like,
yeah.
And this incident, there were two sides. There was one side saying, oh my, whatever, she just had a bad date. And then there was another side saying, like, no, dude, this was like sexual misconduct. Mm-hmm. Thoughts? Where are you at?
So, a bad date. I've been on some bad dates. I went on a date with a guy that like basically couldn't hold a conversation. That was not a good date. Mm-hmm. I did not go home in a cab crying from that date. Mm-hmm. She did. She wept. It was that bad. Did he rape her? Legally, probably no. Mm-hmm. But, and his whole statement behind, so I'm going to go with the not just a bad date. I'm going to go with sexual misconduct, that he used his power which was, you know, he's a celebrity, she's in his apartment, and women are socialized to not say no and not to raise a fuss and to be compliant. All of those things were going against her. And she tried. And she tried multiple times. Let me give you an analogy, okay? Let's say that you invite someone over and you decide that you want to start playing table tennis, okay? And you're playing table tennis. And in the beginning, they're hitting the ball, but at a certain point, they just kind of like aren't really hitting it very much. And they just, at certain points, they put the paddle down. Like, would you want to still keep playing table tennis with that person? Did they indicate to you that they're not really that into table tennis?
Nope.
So maybe we shouldn't, maybe, and even if they don't say, you know what, I don't really want to play table tennis, maybe they just kind of do it half-heartedly.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fun.
No, it's not.
That's not fun to play table tennis with someone who's not into it. So why is it like when it's sex, all of a sudden men are like, I didn't understand. Like Aziz Ansari is like, I thought it was consensual. Like anything else in the world. They've done research on this. Men understand subtle cues, indirect stuff. They do. It's not like a men are from Mars, women are from Venus bullshit. Can I swear on this?
Go for it.
Okay. I should have asked. If that's not the issue, right? That men are just like, oh, I didn't understand. You knew. You ignored it because you wanted to get off. So just own that and like check and like pull a Joey Wilkerson and be like, maybe I should look at my own behavior. Because that's not cool, because she felt that matters, that she felt that way, right? That she felt taken advantage of. She told him that she needed to leave before because she didn't want to hate him. And he still texted her the next day and said, I have fun. How freaking tone deaf is that?
Right.
When your date says, I got to go so I don't hate you, not a good date.
Not at all.
He had a bad date. She had sexual misconduct, right?
Right. So
when your date, it's like all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? And then the next day he texts her like, hey, that was fun. It was not.
So with that story, you know, I think that the problem.
Hi, Emily.
Wessel. I think the problem that we have when it comes to men stepping up to the front line is that, hey, you have to take a look at yourself when you're on the front line. Because the simple move of stepping up and saying, hey, women shouldn't be sexual assaulted, I'm going to hold people accountable, shouldn't be that hard. I mean, that should be that's low-hanging fruit. But yeah, I think that there is an issue with people having to take a look at their own behavior. What would you say to someone who, you know, might be in their late 20s, early 30s, they're already done with their undergrad life, but they're thinking back and they, you know, they hit that point of like, oh my God, whenever I was 20 years old, that girl on the couch in my dorm, like, oh my God, she gave those signals like that, oh, I'm not really interested, but I just kept moving on. What do you say to someone who looks back on that now and kind of sees that?
So any man who may have been on the receiving end of the reluctant hand job, women, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, well, this is how I get out of this car or this apartment or whatever. I'm just going to do this so I can go home. Any guy who's done that or like pushed it a little too far and the woman actually had to physically, like, I can't believe she moved his hand how many times. Anyway, so the example I want to give, because there's a lot about Me Too, like how do they come back after they've been taken down? Are we never going to let them back in? And I don't think that's the case. I don't think that should be the case, but you need to like acknowledge what you've done. And the person that I would look to for the kind of, because Aziz Ansari did not come back well.
Right. He
gave like half-hearted apologies and it was bullshit. And Louis C.K. also terrible. The person who did a really good job, as far as I'm concerned, is Dan Harmon. Okay. And I don't know if you know who Dan Harmon is. He created Community, and he was kicked off the show for a year. And I think it was because he was sexually harassing one of his subordinates, one of his writers. Mm-hmm. And he basically tweeted something about it and was talking about Me Too and about how men need to apologize if they've done something wrong, something like that. And the woman who he abused and harassed, go away, little boy. I'm sorry, my kid. Sorry. The woman who he harassed, responded to his tweet and said, please elaborate. And he did. And he basically admitted everything he did wrong. He admitted fault. He said, like, I was interested in you and you weren't in me, and I treated you like an object. And it was terrible what I did to you. He empathized with her. He spoke from her point of view, like, what you deserved from me was this, and what you got was this. And it was terrible what I did to you, and I am sorry. And she wrote back, she's like, yeah, that was good.
There you go.
There is a path. There is a path. It is a difficult path.
Right.
It is a path where you have to admit that you made a mistake. You have to empathize with the person that you may have, and not blame the person that you have mistreated. And I think I think that's just, hopefully being a good person, that we should all be thinking about that when someone, for whatever reason, something gets drawn to your attention, either by the person pointing it out or just something happens in the news. You're like, ooh, did I do that? Mm-hmm. We've all behaved badly in one point or another, right? Yeah. And sometimes, and like any bit of power that we have, we may misuse it. It happens. There was this one girl in high school. I was bullied a lot in high school. And there was this one girl, and I had the ability to bully her, and damn it, I did. And it's just one time, and it was mean. And what I did was mean. And I don't like who I was in that moment. But if I ever, see her again, I would admit it and be like, yeah, no, it was because, I was picked on so much, and I saw an opportunity, and damn it, I took it, and it made me feel powerful. And it was a terrible thing that I did to you. No one is immune from this. Nobody is a perfect person that, never has done anything to hurt anybody else. Nobody's perfect. And you can recover from this, but only if you really dig deep. Yeah. And admit to yourself that, either look back in your life and be like, ooh, yeah, that was not good what I did, or admit at least that you're capable of doing that if you're not guarding yourself or paying enough attention to the other person. And a lot of this is, if Aziz Ansari wasn't paying attention to her and didn't see what she was throwing down, which was multiple verbal and nonverbal cues, it was because he was treating her like an object.
Right.
He wasn't actively considering what she liked, right? He was doing what he wanted to do to her, right? And he pushed as much as he could, and she told him to back off. He'd back off a little, and he'd go back in, because it was all about him and what he wanted. And anytime you're with another person and you start acting that way, someone's going to get hurt, whether it's sexually or financially or like whatever. And especially if there's a power differential, right? Especially if, they're, and for men, there's always a power differential, pretty much. And it depends on who you date. Like, what are you into? If you're like a scrawny guy who likes bodybuilders, then maybe the power differential is not there physically. Yeah. But women are taught and are acutely aware of our smaller size and our lesser upper body strength. Mm-hmm. So we are always aware that there's danger. And we're taught constantly that if you are not compliant with a guy, like if a guy yells at me on the street and starts shouting at me, how am I supposed to respond in a way that's not going to get me murdered?
Right.
And I don't know. And we get conflicting advice. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So for men, please be aware that women have that in the back of it. We're taught constantly. We get the message all the time that if we are not compliant and if we piss you off, you could kill us.
Yeah.
Pretty easily.
It happens.
Yeah, all the time. There's actually a Tumblr account that's called When Women Refuse. Mm-hmm. And it's a place where women just talk, either they put news stories too, but like women also tell their stories about how a man reacted with violence when they told him no. And these are ingrained in us. We know that. So be understanding that if a woman gives you a soft no, it's not because she's trying to confuse or mislead you. It's because she's afraid.
There it is. Okay, so sitting
This
here,
is so uplifting. I'm so sorry.
You're good. Sitting here in 2020 and looking back on the past 4 years, what are some areas where you think Me Too may have failed, or at least didn't achieve all it could?
So the successes Me Too has had, the biggest success it had, I'm going to answer a different question first. The biggest success it had was just people talking about it more. There's actually has been, I've been reading articles, there has been impacts, at least, the number of cases reported to the EEOC, the number of investigations has gone up. The number of people reporting crimes, like sexual assault crimes to the police, has gone up. Unfortunately, what has not gone up nearly as much is the number of arrests and convictions. So Me Too has not infiltrated your lovely law enforcement friend. Has not had, like, and if like that's the key, right? She was like, I don't like this Me Too. Ugh. Yeah. Anyway, it hasn't. It's raised consciousness, and there have been some legislative changes. Some laws have changed in certain areas, but there have been a lot of places where the law hasn't changed and it needs to. And it certainly hasn't impacted as many careers as I would have liked, one in particular. That's problematic. But I don't think it's done. And that's the good part, that this is not, obviously there's a huge, like, storm of activity right when it got started in 2017 and into 2018, and it's kind of cooled a bit, but it's still in the news and stuff's still happening, and there's these knock-on effects, and it's rippling. So I haven't lost hope for it yet. The biggest things I would say is that it needs to be more inclusive of different races and also, different gender identities. And I don't think it's not, but I think it needs to be more actively inclusive of these groups. And that I would love it if men started feeling like they could talk about their own traumas, because they exist. We know they do statistically. It's smaller, but it's there. And so that's what I would like to see. And I would like to see, better training and better, especially in law enforcement. That's where if we're really going to start putting these motherfuckers in jail, that's where the change needs to happen. And it hasn't. It's little bits and pieces, but nothing near to where it should be.
Yeah. Well, it looks like I'm getting a countdown from Instagram. I think we're only allowed so much time to do live, so I'm getting the countdown here. But thank you so much for hopping on and chit-chatting with us today. This has been one of my favorite episodes so far, so thank you for being here. For everyone that's still out there watching, thank you guys for tuning in. You can go on our website, www.greeklaw.org, and you can see episode 1 and 2, and this will be up on there tomorrow, so you can check out this again tomorrow. If anyone needs to get a hold of Professor Sweeny or you have any questions, send us a DM and we'll get you in contact with her. So I'm sure she'd love to answer any questions that you have. I don't know if Georgia is still somewhere out there, but next week is our season finale of Teal, Tint, and Georgia will be on talking about the effectiveness of campus resources and also how sexual misconduct affects the LGBTQ plus community on college campuses. So definitely tune in for that next Thursday at 7 p.m. But other than that, thank you guys again. Thank you, Professor Sweeny.
And thank you, Joey. You're doing great work. I'm so happy. This was like part of an independent study he did with me.
The study continues.
Yes. And the work has to continue, unfortunately, but I'm glad. Safe. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Stay safe in these quarantine times, and see you next week. Later.
Bye.